This may catch you by surprise, but the carnivore diet is not a normal way to eat. Hey, what's shaking bacon? My name is Bruno Panucci. I hope you're doing well. You know, a lot of people start going on about the carnivore diet and how, you mention you only eat meat and you get a lot of sideways looks because it's not something that's too common out there. Not many people have heard of the carnivore diet. People who have a history of losing weight and they're familiar with keto have often heard about the carnivore diet. But the average Joe out there who never struggled with their weight or health problems often have never heard of anything like this. So when they hear about it, they do not look upon it with favor typically. And you get a lot of sideways glances, and it's a real shame because I understand it because, it's been drilled into us, all of us, for the last 40 to 50 years that red meat is unhealthy for us. Just meat in general is unhealthy for us, and we should be leading with a plant-based diet. All the professionals say that, and that's a real shame because it turns out all that is based on nonsense. But aside from all that, in society, it's not normal to eat a meat-based diet or even a complete meat-only diet. But let's talk about some other things that are not normal. So one of the first things I want you to stop and do is define normal. And a lot of people out there are going to have different answers. And of course, if you're against something like the idea of carnivore, you're going to have your own smart ass answers. You're probably going to leave in the comments. But stop and just think. Common and normal are two different things. I'm not going to get into the fact that maybe we all started eating meat before we started eating vegetables, or vegetables came first and we thrived on vegetables. And then once we started to hunt and then we started to eat more meat and we started to thrive once we started doing that. I'm not going to get into that because I don't know enough about it. And quite frankly, I think it's a bunch of hoopla. We don't know. We weren't there. I know here and now. And when people do a carnivore diet, most of their health problems typically go away. You have to stop and reassess what's common and what's normal. For example, people being on drugs. People being on drugs from the time they're in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and the older you get, typically in North America, the more drugs you get put on. It's common to be on a lot of pharmaceuticals. Well, that's not good. It's not normal. It's common, but it's not normal. So let's stop and just put things into perspective with this video. It's really frustrating when it's normal to be put on a handful of medications that have a lot of side effects, and it turns out lots of these medications interact with other medications you're on and cause other problems. So your pharmacist better be on top of all the interrelationships that your drugs have with each other and what they can do to you. Because even most drugs that rarely have a side effect, or it's not common they have a strong side effect, still have a side effect, especially if they're mixing with other drugs. Yes, it's not normal to be on a meat-only diet. Well, time might change that. It's common based on your geography. Mind you, I agree most civilizations don't eat just meat, and also it depends on your point in history, but let's stop and think about that. It's definitely not normal to be on pharmaceuticals. And when people go on a carnivore diet, those pharmaceuticals often drop to the wayside. They go from a laundry list the size of your arm down to maybe one or two or no drugs. And that's a great place to be. You shouldn't be on a drug if you don't need to be on it. If your health problems clear up, then you shouldn't be doing that. I went off my blood pressure medication because I didn't have high blood pressure. Why was I on high blood pressure medication to begin with? Another thing is pain. We all accept pain as a part of life. The older you get, the slower you get, the worse you move, the worse your joints feel. And we accept that as normal and common. As most people get pleasantly surprised when they go to a keto or one-up that with a carnivore diet and their joint pain goes away and they feel better and they're like, wow, I feel 20 years younger. Well, that's a wonderful thing to experience. And typically the longer you do it, the better and better you get. The more strict you get with carnivore, the better and better you get. There's a saying out there, 95% gets you maybe 50% of the way, but that extra 5% of strictness on a carnivore diet is equal to that first 50%. And those are just like estimates, of course. It's just people throwing numbers out there to try and get their point across that the more strict you are and the longer you do a carnivore diet, the better you typically feel. Versus other diets, say, and I'm not trying to bash them, but vegan or vegetarian diets, they feel good because they go from a standard American diet to a very relatively clean diet. And then the longer they do it, they don't realize how far down the rabbit hole they're going, and their health starts to get worse and worse. Whereas carnivores, the longer they do it and the more strict they do it, the better and better they feel. Another thing is it's not normal to be overweight, but yes, it's common. More than 50% of the population of North America is overweight from one degree to another. That's common, but it's not normal to be overweight. I think historically, and I'm not talking thousands of years ago, I'm talking in the last number of hundreds of years at least, I think it's normal that people put on weight in the winter and take some of that weight off in the spring as they're more active and they get to do more. My own dad did that for years and years and years. He still does that to a normal degree now, though. Maybe 10 pounds at the most he puts on over the winter. Whereas before, it was common for him to put on, say, 40 or 45 pounds in the winter because he was just less active. He's an active guy. Even though he's 82, he's a really active guy. And carnivore balances this for most people. Now, my dad's not carnivore, but most people who are on a carnivorous diet, who try and be as strict with it especially, they find their weight gets very stable. Once their health problems go away and their insulin gets balanced and their hormones get balanced and they find their sweet spot with their fuel intake, what happens is their weight becomes incredibly stable, and it's a nice place to be. Typically, in my opinion, the more you've been overweight, the longer you've been overweight, it has a direct effect on how long it takes before your body gets healthy enough to get to that maintenance point. Some people, they're the exception to the rule and they start carnivore at 60 years old and they've dropped all their weight after a lifetime of yo-yo dieting and health problems, and it works great. Other people, it depends on the damage and how long it takes your body to heal from that damage. Your body has to recycle itself, and sometimes it takes longer for certain areas of your body to heal more than others. So just because you're healed and you've lost weight doesn't mean that you're completely healed. It means you're still healing under the skin. Now, the one thing you don't find out there is people who are underweight, but people who come from, say, a vegetarian or vegan background who become carnivore because they eventually admit that it hasn't been serving them well in the past, they find they sometimes put on weight. And some people who maybe haven't been eating enough put on weight, but often what's happening is they're putting on lean mass, they're putting on muscle, they're putting on bone density, and they start feeling better because it's also not normal to be underweight. This is like a body composition diet that brings your body to an exact point where it needs to be. If you're underweight or overweight, if you have health problems, everything goes to a nice balance. And that's the goal we all want to be at in life. And the carnivore diet provides that for us. And the more balance we have, the more we can move around and the better we feel. So we want to keep all this in mind. Yes, the carnivore diet is not a normal diet. This came up in a coaching group I was in, and it became a topic of conversation about normal. And the carnivore diet isn't normal, but all these health problems are not normal, and they're common, but they're not normal. So when you get kind of weird glances, and then you can turn around and say, you know what, you have to understand this is working for me. I've lost a lot of weight doing this, and my numbers are getting better. And my doctor, as much as he's not a fan of what I'm doing, can't really complain or argue about this. And you got to keep in mind, there's no data out there proving or disproving a carnivore diet. There is nothing out there that proves it's a bad diet, other than the misinformation doctors have been given, and they've passed that information down to us through the decades. So a lot of people have a hard time changing their mindset, and you have to be patient with those people. So keep this in mind. I really appreciate you watching this video. Thanks a lot, and take care.